is also from the level 2 introduction to mentoring, but it's a different path. Now, I know that Michelle did tell me what the path was, but I can't remember. That's because I'm pretty slack. But I do know that the title of her speech is something that will inspire us all and perhaps move us around roadblocks. With her introduction to mentoring speech entitled Can Do and Will Do, and Zaldi, if you can time Michelle for a period of 5, 6 and 7. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michelle Alba-Lim, Can Do and Will Do.
It felt so strange standing outside that 3-story building in the heat of the sun. I couldn't help asking myself, is this a serious job? Are they really looking for applicants? Why do they have us standing out here in the heat of the sun? No chairs, not even stools, nothing to write on. They hand you a piece of paper, one sheet of paper, well, actually 3 sheets of paper stapled together, the application form, but nothing to write on, no clipboard. How do you write? And so what I did is I kind of crouched over to the side of the building, leaned against it, and held the piece of paper up and wrote on it and filled out my application. And all the time I was thinking, wait until I get to speak with a person in charge of this company's human resources department. They need to be taught things. And as I was doing that, as I was thinking about it, I realized, wait a minute, they are looking for a human resource manager. Okay, this is an opportunity. And so now with more enthusiasm, I filled out the form as best I could. I wrote out my credentials. I walked in, smiled at the receptionist, handed them the form, and said that I would appreciate if they could give us some stools so that if we were going to sit outside, at least we could sit, not stand. And she said, oh, it's okay, you can sit here inside. Hallelujah. The feeling of the air conditioning inside was like an oasis compared to the heat outside. Fast forward to the end of my interview with a company president and the vice president for international operations. That's a different story why the vice president for international operations was interviewing the human resources manager. But we had gone through all of the questions about my credentials, about my experience, about my understanding of the labor code, how to deal with people, all of that. It was an incredible 3-hour interview. Actually, more than 3 hours. But my mind was ready to close down, but I suddenly was jolted awake when I heard in his droning voice the company president asking me if I understood the difference between can do and will do. And I bit back a response, a snarky response, like, well, the spelling. Can is 3 letters and will is 4. Of course, I did not do that. I paused. This was long before Toastmasters, but I paused and I thought, what is the best answer to such a question? And I then led in with the response which many Toastmasters have learned to do in table topics contests. That is an excellent question, Mr. Lee. I would be hard-pressed to give a response to that. Perhaps I should ask you, being the company president, what to you is the difference between can do and will do? that was desperation. That was me just struggling, trying not to ruin 3 hours of interviews with a really dumb answer. So I flipped the question around and asked him, Hallelujah, who would have known that that was, I think, the clincher. The fact that instead of me trying to bluster through giving a response, I turned around and asked him instead. Needless to say, I got the job. And that first afternoon, when I turned around and asked him the question instead, was the beginning of a 6-year relationship. He was my mentor long before the term mentor was probably actively used. I was his student, I was the learner, he was the sensei, he was Confucius. By the way, he was Chinese, so that was very appropriate. But I learned, among many, many, many other things in that 6-year relationship, the difference between the can do and the will do. It was his abbreviated, oversimplified way of saying that there are people who have the ability, they can do, and there are people with the willingness, they will do. Are you able to distinguish between who are the people with the ability and who are the people with the willingness? And are you able to bring these two groups together so that you will have people who will be both can do and will do? And most importantly, are you that kind of a person who is a can do and a will do? My growth experience with him continues. It is incredible because that conversation was in 1984. Do the math, 1984, 2019. But there is not a single day when something that he said in his droning, uh, very raspy, throaty voice, I always felt that he was about to cough. Michelle, do you know the difference between the can do and the will do? That comes back to me whenever people don't do things and people say, oh, they're just lazy. Oh, they're just so stubborn. Oh, they're so recalcitrant. I always wonder, are they really? Maybe they're willing to, but maybe they don't know how. Or yes, maybe there are others who know how, but maybe they're not motivated to do whatever it is you want them to do. So that was one of the gazillion lessons that I learned from Peter Nicholas Lee, one of my mentors. For another chapter, another time, I will tell you another story of my mentor. For now, back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Michelle. Can do and will do. One of a gazillion lessons, says Michelle. If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. Don't exaggerate. Oh, hang on. Sorry. All right.